When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak, and he taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Here ends these readings from Scripture. May God grant you wisdom and understanding to these most holy words. Amen. Please join me in prayer. O God, come to us in the quietness of this place. Center our hearts and our minds on you and you alone. Open us to the power and to the presence of your Holy Spirit, and remind us that your love, mercy, and grace comes to us unasked for and free. Amen. So located on a hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee, the traditional mount on which Jesus delivered his Sermon on the Mount, sits the Church of the Beatitudes. In fact, on the front of your bulletin this morning is a picture of the Church of the Beatitudes, which I took. It's actually from the back side. It gives a different perspective than the normal, what you might have, if you're familiar with this church. So this modern church was built between 1936 and 1938 near the site of 4th century Byzantine ruins. Now the floor plan is octagonal, the 8 sides representing the 8 Beatitudes. Now Matthew's anthology of Jesus' sayings and moral teachings, which are collectively known as the Sermon on the Mount, recorded in Matthew's 5th, 6th, and 7th chapters of his Gospel, it begins with the Beatitudes, a litany of pronouncing blessings upon what are apparently the lowliest of people. Now, while opinions vary as to exactly how many distinct statements into which the Beatitudes should be divided, ranging between 8 and 10, most scholars consider them to be only 8. So the 8 Beatitudes in Matthew's Gospel follow a simple pattern, if you will. Jesus names a group of people normally thought to be unfortunate and pronounces them blessed. The poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, the righteous, the merciful, the pure in heart, the persecuted, and those with the arduous task of peacemaking. All are blessed. So I was privileged to visit the Church of the Beatitudes this past June during the sabbatical pilgrimage to the Holy Land. This was my 3rd pilgrimage to the Holy Land, leading a contemporary studies trip with the Society for Biblical Studies, which is based in Arlington, Mass. Now, SBS distinguishes itself from commercial sightseeing, seeking to reform biblical scholarship and to redeem the idea of pilgrimage. The Reverend Peter Miano, Executive Director of SBS, writes, "What is the difference between a tourist and a pilgrim? Tourists pass through places, but Pilgrims let places pass through them, allowing their hearts to be changed. Tourists want to know only where Jesus walked 2,000 years ago. Pilgrims know that walking where Jesus walked 2,000 years ago is only the beginning of a pilgrimage. To the pilgrim, where Jesus walked leads to asking how Jesus walked. In doing so, the pilgrim learns the most important lesson of all, where Jesus is walking and with whom he is walking today. It is spiritually uplifting to visit the places named in the Bible. After 3 pilgrimages to the Holy Land, every gospel passage draws me closer. I saw that. I was at that very place being described. Jesus talked about that place, and it's really not that far away. You see, a pilgrimage to the Holy Land gives you a 3-dimensional view of Scripture. But here's the thing. Some of the places that we visited are not, in fact, holy sites. They are referred to as commemorative sites. Now, the Church of the Beatitudes is considered a commemorative site because there is no evidence that this is where Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount. Does it matter that where Jesus actually preached the Beatitudes may not be where this Neo-Byzantine styled house of prayer is located? Regardless of whether this is the place, the Church of the Beatitudes stands in the general area in a very similar setting to where Jesus would have stood as he delivered his famous sermon. As Jerome Murphy O'Connor puts it, from here one can see virtually all the places which Jesus lived and worked. So 3-dimensionally, the area between Tapka and Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee has not changed much over the centuries. So for the tourist as well as the pilgrim, this commemorative site brings one closer to God. The pilgrim wants to go deeper, to learn not only what Jesus' words meant to the community of that day, but also what his words say to us today. So I ask you, what are your attitudes of the Beatitudes? Do you hunger and thirst for righteousness? In what ways are we instruments of God's peace? How are we humbly serving as the hands and feet of Christ in our world today? I don't know about you, but Matthew reminds me of my own inaction and complacency about God's kingdom. Matthew's words remind me that I oftentimes fall short. God's word does that sometimes, not God. So that's why a couple of weeks ago, I met with my U.S. senators, Senator Susan Collins, and a spokesperson for Senator Angus King, to advocate for Palestinian rights, naming the human rights violations I witnessed on my pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Now, Senator Collins was very attentive. Senator King's representative interestingly said that no one from the faith community has been in touch with the senator's office advocating for Palestinian rights, which I thought was surprising. So I was a voice for the powerless, speaking truth to power, relaying the cries of injustice for those living in occupied territories who are at the mercy of a military power. Who hears their mournful cries? I gotta tell you, You have a different perspective of a person's situation when you look them in the eye and listen attentively to their story. A hallmark of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's legacy is his insistence that we see the great events of world history from the view from below. He urges us to see from the perspective of those who suffer. Now, I thought I understood everything there was to know about the Israeli-Palestinian issues by being attentive to news reports here at home. But little did I realize how one-sided and, yes, very, very complicated these issues are, until I heard different perspectives from opposing sides of the debate directly from the indigenous people living in this area. My attitude of self-righteous indignation around the issues facing Israel and the West Bank suddenly shifted. How could I not say something? Do something? Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel is quoted as saying, "There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest." So I read the Beatitudes not just as blessings, I think they call us to act. You see, examples of injustice and human suffering are all around us. You don't have to travel to the Middle East to find it. One can hardly open up a newspaper or turn on a news broadcast on TV without recognizing the many social problems in our communities and our states. We can't solve all the world's problems, but we are called to be God's instruments wherever and whenever we can. Now, I'm just learning about the issues facing Cape Cod. And interesting, I looked on your website for the church, and there's some exciting outreach opportunities that this congregation is involved in here in the Cape. In Maine, homelessness is an ongoing issue. And boy, this time of year, it gets pretty cold. But opioid addiction, that is just rampant. My home congregation serves the greater Bangor area with homeless outreach. In fact, the sister congregation has a street pastor program, reaching out, walking with those on the streets. There are other churches in the Maine Conference who have partnered with social service agencies to combat drug addiction and to treat mental health related issues. I have no doubt that Cape Cod faces this and other issues where the church can be instrumental in providing support to those in need. Walking with those who suffer, serving a ministry of presence, and being a blessing to others have impact. Professor Caroline Lewis writes, "In this season of Epiphany, the Beatitudes are a call to action to point out just who Jesus really is. Perhaps not the Jesus you want, perhaps the Jesus who likely rubs you the wrong way, perhaps the Jesus that tells the truth about ourselves, the Jesus who reminds us at the most inconvenient times and places what the kingdom of heaven is all about." The prophet Micah calls us, tells us what God requires of us, but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Brian McLaren challenges us, saying, "It's not about the church meeting your needs, it's about you joining the mission of God's people to meet the world's needs." So I see the Beatitudes as a call upon the church to provide hope in the absence of all hope. A call to make Jesus present and visible and manifest in the world that tries desperately to silence those who speak the truth. writes, "There was a time when the church was very powerful. In the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermostat that transformed the mores of society." King goes on, "If today's church does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, it will lose its authenticity, forfeit the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning." So I see the Beatitudes as our Kairos moment, calling the church to move beyond stereotypes, long-standing prejudices and biases, to be Christ's visible presence to those on the margins of society who feel invisible. In these days of division and acrimony, we need an attitudinal reminder that the church's role is to make Christ known to those whom we meet. Contrary to those who believe that what we do and what we say and what we believe do not matter, our hunger and thirst for righteousness matters. It really does. This pilgrim's heart has been changed by my visit to a commemorative site. My eyes have seen those with whom Jesus is walking today. May your hearts be changed and your eyes opened to the injustices of the cries of those who mourn around you. May you be instrumental in proclaiming the love of God to those with whom you walk.